cultural institutions, and you see how they are going to perpetrate this kind of vice by tolerating it or denying that it happens. This is what they will say. You know, our culture, please don't violate our culture. In our culture, we promote forced marriage, we promote rape, because in some cultures, actually they have to rape you to qualify to be a married woman in our country. So how are cultural institutions looking at those, saying these are actually perpetrating violence against women or sexual violence? Our cultures will tell you, you know what, for us in our culture, we respect African cultures, our African traditions, and so what they will say is that, oh my God, you girl, or you woman, why don't you learn to respect our cultures? You know, respect the elderly. Okay, if they have defiled you or raped you, it is just that respect. You're going to embarrass our what? Our clan. I think the cultural institutions should resist from sending those messages, because now those messages are producing violent men.
But how do we bring them on board, because they're the root of all these problems? How do we change their mindsets and their ways of thinking? It has been so for ages upon ages. So how do we change that? Yeah,
I also want to really appreciate the cultural institutions that have come out.
Well, they do well, and we are a society because of them. But with regards to this particular vice, how do we turn around that?
I think for me, I'm beginning to see various, at least small steps with various cultural institutions, whereby they are also trying to say, let's promote the positive social norms, positive cultures of respect, dignity, love, and happiness. And I think that is where we need to begin. We should hold on to that. The cultural institutions that are trying now to talk about that. They're talking about women also enjoying the environment in which they are, whether you are at home, whether you are in the house, whether you're digging, whether you are in school. The cultural institutions have come out to say that in our cultures we respect both men and women. I think them speaking out is also part of the solution.
Okay.
And I think through this counseling, you know, we have these pre-marital counseling sessions, and then the marital counseling sessions, and then they have like the youth gatherings or clan gatherings. I'll give an example of the Baganda. The Baganda have what they call the Nkobazambogo. Then the Basoga have the Basoga and Sende, something like that.
Right.
But I see in those spaces they are also beginning to have conversations on sexual violence, on domestic violence. I think let's keep that.
All right.
Because then increased awareness will enable whoever is supposed to perpetrate or to promote this kind of violation, they are listening and saying, oh, by the way, this is outlawed. Sexual violence in all its forms is actually a crime.
Right. And I totally agree that would be a great point to start, because whenever we see women, you know, transitioning into marriage, when you have these conversations with your, you know, judges, with your mothers, they always tell you, if it ever happens that your husband slaps you, just chill, just, you know, it's okay, just, you know, be tolerant about it. But we need to change those conversations, like you're saying. These mothers need to start telling their girls totally different things, that, you know what, you can speak out, and this is how you solve that issue. Let's get to how we can create safe spaces, especially let's now focus on the girls and in schools. We know that even in schools, where we think we send our girls to go and have an education, where we think these are the most safe spaces for them, we're still having issues with regards to sexual violence. So how best can that be addressed? Because a young girl, very timid, being sexually, you know, violated by a teacher, a head teacher, a principal, you know, how can we start having those conversations and changing that space, just to ensure that for real they're safe spaces for our girls?
Yeah, I think, well, for starters, let's start by also enabling our viewers out there to understand this whole issue around sexual violence. Because when you talk about sexual violence, we tend to limit the conversation. Now, just in quick terms, sexual violence involves so many things. There's sexual harassment, which happens in schools, universities, but then also in our churches and mosques. So then we also have female genital mutilation, which is a form of sexual violence.
Right.
We have rape, sexual harassment, Extramarital affairs is also a form of sexual violence, and we ignore to talk about that.
How? Really?
Yes.
Extramarital affairs?
Yes, because we are talking about, you know, someone who is violating someone's rights sexually. And so you find that one of the partners is actually sleeping outside with several partners. But also we have our what? Our norms, our cultures that promote male infidelity. But just imagine, the government has put up development programs that are supposed to fight HIV. But our cultures are telling us to be man enough, you have to have so many women. And these so many women, you even don't know their status. What does that mean? You're getting infected and you're infecting your wife and maybe the unborn children. So like you see, this cultural issue still will affect us in one way or the other in terms of development. But also what you said is very pertinent, that how do we ensure that we create a safe space in schools and universities? That is very good. One of the things I've realized is that when sexual violence happens, you will find that any person who is committing that crime, and me, I call it a crime, whether sexual harassment, whether rape or defilement, this person is actually coercing, manipulating, threatening, or forcing the other person into sexual activity.
Right.
If we understand that, then we'll know what these girls are going through. Now, the perpetrators are very cunning and they are smart. You know, these are perpetrators who will target an individual on the basis of his or her vulnerability. I'll give an example. For the girls at school or the female students at the universities, the lecturers have sexually exploited these female students at the universities, that mainly because they have not yielded to their sexual demands.
Right.
And then they are threatening to really not to fail them in the examinations. And so you find that they know their vulnerabilities. These are girls who are coming from deep down in Kisoro. She comes to university and then the lecturer is saying, if you want to get a degree, you have to sleep with me. If she doesn't, and then the family back home in the village, they're expecting her to really graduate within this period, it causes some kind of dynamics there. And so we are saying sexual harassment in the universities and sexual violence in schools, how do we start to change that? One of the things I think that is very important is having a massive campaign around sexual harassment. I think if universities and schools can design programs that are going to raise awareness about sexual harassment, for teachers to know, the administrators to know, the students to know, I think that is going to help, because starting to address a problem begins with talking about it.
Right.
But in most cases, universities, lecturers, and what they fear to talk about sexual harassment. I give an example. There are certain things that we do. We can incorporate those messages in those kind of programs, activities at the universities. We have orientation programs, then we have administrative meetings, we have top management meetings. In all those meetings, let there be a deliberate action that in all these meetings we'll talk about sexual harassment.
Do you think it would help to create clubs? We have clubs in schools in terms of just empowering our girls, because the issue is once you're defiled or once you're harassed sexually, you don't know where to go. You're like, who do I tell? I'm afraid to tell my friends. I'm afraid to tell my parents. If I go to the police, they will defile me even further, for example, or they will mishandle me. I can't go to the hospital. So creating clubs, vibrant clubs in schools, will it help?
That's a very good thing. And for me, I call it bystander approach. The bystander approach is where we have, like, you can create clubs in schools. And by the way, it's not about creating clubs, and that's where sometimes we get wrong. Create clubs, but also empower them with information around sexual harassment. But empower these girls and boys on what it means to have equal power relations. Because we also don't want clubs that are going to reinforce power issues, where the men or the boys are dominating these girls. But also we need to create like what we call sentinel sites, like different departments, create their own kind of clubs or associations on sexual harassment. That will do. So for me, I call them measures that can be put in place to continue addressing this, and then also give them skills. when you create these clubs, tell them if a person reports an incident of sexual harassment, this is how you handle. And this is how you make safe referrals, not only referral services, but safe referrals. So I think those clubs are very important. But then also, we need to understand the language we use in the universities.
The language.
That language is very, very hurting. First of all, it stigmatizes the victims who are spoken out, but also there is a culture of blaming the victims. Because when the victims come and report, then you will see people blaming them. Why did you dress like that? Why do you keep on moving with these girls, these boys? That's why they even raped you while you're drunk. I mean, it doesn't matter whether how the person is dressed, which place it has happened. The thing is, the responsibility is with that person who has committed a crime. And so for me, what I think is that the language at the university that I see is that we use this term called allegations. And then a person is reporting, and then they are saying, you know, these are just allegations, we'll see, but this is a sensitive matter. Who tells you that it has not been sensitive to this young girl, a woman, when someone has raped or they are sexually harassing her?
Right.
It is equally sensitive. And then we should stop the word allegations to say, oh, thank you so much for reporting, we are going to investigate. I think our language of blaming the victims and then praising these boys and then the men who are at the universities, that they are only men. Maybe they have been attracted to you. I mean, it's not wrong for those girls to be beautiful, pretty, soft-spoken, and you say, you know, I was attracted to her. And that is the reason why you had to do what you did. So I think the language also has to change to create an enabling environment for the girls and the female students to break the silence.
Let me ask you a question, because the process of just reporting has always been not streamlined. So teachers today, if I'm a girl, if I'm a woman, and it happens to me in whatever space, it can happen in the workplace, like we were having a conversation before we went on air. It can happen anywhere in the public spaces. But if it happens to me today, I'm a viewer watching today, what ideally should be the process of me reporting? Where first should I go to? Do I run to a hospital, or if it's for real rape, violence, or do I run to a police station?
Okay, yeah, I think in terms of what services exist, we still also have to recognize certain services that are existing and some protection mechanisms for survivors of sexual violence. Different organizations are doing that, are providing services, but I know of the different health centers in Kampala and across the country. So in this case, the police is also doing much to really support the survivors. So in this case, if you've been raped, the first thing is really go and access services, medical services, like HIV PEP, which is a post-exposure prophylaxis. If you're really raped, and I want to call upon the girls and the women out there, if you've been defiled and raped, please first run to any health center to access HIV PEP.
Immediately.
Immediately. Don't even rush yourself, don't bathe, don't do what, go, and then they'll do what? They'll help you to get the medication that will support you in the event that someone who has raped you is actually HIV negative.
Please say that again. You said don't take a shower, don't change, don't do anything.
Yes. Once you have been raped or defiled, don't take a shower, don't remove the clothes, just go to a health center. After you've gone to the health center, then you can go to the police and you lodge your complaint. And the police and the health workers actually, we are very grateful that they are doing that. And then the other thing, if you rush to police or the LC chairperson in your community, the first thing we are calling upon the LC chairpersons and the police officers, if a person has been raped and defiled, kindly first refer them for medical treatment, such as emergency contraceptive and HIV PEP. Then you can now proceed with the legal angle.
Right. Yeah. And when you've used all these processes, for example, God forbid it's happened to someone, and I'm sure it's been happening, and we have victims maybe watching. If it is a victim watching today, it happened to them, they went to the hospital, now they're good to go. They went to report this to the police, but the case has never been taken up. Yeah. What should they do? I think
that's a very pertinent question. We are still challenged. We are challenged with case backlog. within the judicial system. But then also I think what we are trying to do right now is the whole issue of enabling the judicial system on coming up with, we want them to establish, you know, what we call GBV, gender-based violence, specialized courts.
Right.
One, they are going to address the issue of the case backlog, but then also they are going to kind of provide sensitive, responsive mechanisms to these survivors. Because sometimes the survivors, we say they are not cooperating, but it's because of the environment. I mean, this person is going to go to police or go to courts of law, but they are parading her in a space, an open space where everyone is listening. And then you see maybe a magistrate or a police officer saying, oh, where is the so-and-so who was raped? Who is following up on her case of rape? So the person will not go back. So these are some of the things we're trying to address as ActionAid and other partners in terms of how do we work with these institutions to provide response support to immediately actually to survivors of violence.
Right. And we know charity begins at home. Before we get to what conversations we're supposed to be having as parents with our children, let's talk about the religious institutions. Like you rightfully said, if they're not as clean as we presume them to be. How can that be addressed? Over and above you saying, you actually mentioned that the pastors, the preachers, the leaders need to be, articulating these issues. But most of the times they're the ones who perpetrate this vice against the faithfuls, the believers. So how do we solve that issue in that space?
Yeah, I think for the religious institutions, the religious leaders, and even us, the followers, I think it takes two angles to that. One, how do they perpetrate this kind of violation? One is the individuals who have actually used their powers, abused their powers as pastors, as leaders, as preachers to actually commit the crime. But two is in terms of what they preach. What they preach actually tolerates the behavior, makes people accept the behavior. This whole thing called forgiveness among religious leaders. You go to church, you go to mosques, you go to everywhere, the religious leaders will remind you, okay, Jesus was very forgiveful, so please forgive. And then the song is going to be forgive this defiler, forgive this rapist, forgive, forgive, forgive. So when we tell the people to forgive these people who are raping them, who are defiling them, we are tolerating this crime. It is a crime. I call it a crime because it is outlawed.
Right.
So now we are saying the religious leaders should stop really telling people to forgive. Let them encourage the victims to speak out and pursue justice where it is possible. So one of the things we can do is for the religious leaders, what are those biblical values, in the Bible that promote safety for young girls and women? Why don't we use those values to say, actually, when you don't defile, when you don't rape a woman, this is how you're promoting the values of Christianity, of love, loving your neighbor, the way you love yourself, and all that. So I think we need to watch the religious beliefs that are trying to produce, again, like I said, these violent, abusive men. Yeah. Okay,
all right. And we do have a bite for you, and this is just in line with this particular conversation. So I'd like you to take a look at this.
We have been addressing it in many ways, in our pulpits, in our councils, everywhere. But now we want to bring the attention of everybody and to advocate that we should get away with gender-based violence because it is an evil in our society. So we are following God's way because God holds people with equal consideration, and because He created us as human beings in His own image, and the church should follow the same. Time has come. We should stop victimizing people because of their gender. So we are going to be there, and I invite you and everybody to come and join us. I will begin at Mengo Senior Secondary School. We want to make our voice very loud that time has gone when we can still practice gender-based violence in families, men beating their wives, and these days women beat their husbands.
These days women also beat their husbands.
Okay. I think I have a different view on that. Sometimes we do forget that there is this whole, I think you can give me time to come and talk about the battered woman syndrome. These women who seem to be beating their husbands, they are not beating them because of the power relations. Sometimes it is self-defense or retaliating, or what we call the battered woman syndrome. What is the battered woman syndrome? The battered woman syndrome is a woman who has gone through all the cycle of violence. Because I hear people say, but you know, men are also sexually violated or emotionally violated. And they forget that the women actually have gone through all that cycle of violence. They have gone through physical violence, economic violence, emotional violence, and sexual violence. And that is the battered woman syndrome. They are tired. And because they are tired, sometimes they also retaliate or revenge. So that's a different conversation. Which is also a crime, though. It is a crime, but I mean the circumstances under which this happens. But then you will even see society is quick to say, women, like you've already said it, but women are beating. You know, it's like, oh, this is new. But when it is a man beating, the man is just disciplining. Yes, I do appreciate that some men actually face violence, sexual violence, and we don't allow any form of violence against anyone, either boys, men, or girls, or women. We need to deal with the perpetrator. But unfortunately, the kind of sexual violence that men and boys experience, or men and boys are at a risk of rape, in different places, like in the conflict areas. Right. And by the way, by the fellow men. Men have raped boys and men themselves. Detention centers, prisons, and conflict areas. But we are saying everyone is not supposed to experience rape. Right, okay. And as we come to a close, I know that we are on the 13th day of the 16 days of activism, but if we are to get this right, if the next generation is to have a totally different conversation than what we are having today, like we're having a banter, is saying charity begins at home. It all begins with what we parents tell our children. So as we come to a close, what are the 3 pointers that parents need to be taking up on a day-to-day basis, just to infuse this information to the children? I think there's something I want to tell you here. I have seen so many parents who are trying to enable their children, including the boys and the girls, on how to grow up valuing each other. Yes. You know, promoting values of equality, which is basically dignity, respect, and love. That is what equality is all about. But then, when women are doing that, saying, okay, boys, you can also now cook, you can also respect people like the way the girls are doing this, society is blaming the women. They are blaming the women from running away from our customs of telling the girls you have to be submissive. Oh, girls are supposed to be quiet. Oh, you girls don't speak. So now we are seeing a situation where there is that kind of backlash. And yet that is what I want to encourage the women who are doing that, or other women. Other women are promoting certain negative values because they are part of this socialization process. Patriarchy or society has given these women the powers to be the custodians of these negative social norms and harmful cultural practices. Right. And now the women are beginning to tell, when they tell their kids to do what society asks them to do, those are good women. Now, women who are saying, no, we can, my girl or my children, if you're defiled, speak out, then society is labeling these women for really promoting bad values. But either way, parents need to stand strong and give the right information to their children, regardless of the gender. Exactly. Thank you so much, Brenda Kugonza, Technical Coordinator at Action Aid International Uganda. Keep your views coming. We really value your feedback. The hashtag is Morning at NTV across all the social media platforms. Let's keep this conversation going. We can never stop it at this. So Morning at NTV still continues. Up next is Take Note with Flavia Tumusime. Don't go away.
Coming soon on NTV.
When I was your age, I always sat with my parents and we would eat, drink, laugh, and talk about the good things that God has done for us as a family unit.
Timothy, I entered the bathroom first, so either go down or I don't know, wait. The boys in my class, they make fun of me just because I'm flat-chested.
No, you're not flat-chested. Did you want watermelons on your chest?
I need to know where you put her.
This is where I put her.